Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the Minigame Podcast. Today is Monday, May 26th. That is Memorial Day in the United States. So potentially very little video game news is going to come out today. We'll do about an hour warm up and then we'll move into the news. Actually, I probably will try to actually go a little bit faster today because I woke up this morning not feeling particularly good, and then it's just been raining all day, so the humidity probably is playing a role in that too, and so I am probably going to want to move quicker. And yes, I tried to even take a nap in the middle of the afternoon and got woken up by it raining so much. Like, I honestly for a second there thought that somebody was inside my house and that I was being home invaded effectively. But yeah, while I was half asleep, took me a second or two to wake up out of that. Okay, so what have I been doing? I worked a little bit on Sunday on my macros, and so I weirdly am kind of having to do everything in yet another different way. Just opening all pages effectively fresh and new wherever they may lie in whatever Firefox window, which is going to be the first Firefox window always. So yeah, it seems like you just cannot at the moment with the version of UI Vision that is, and with the bugs it has, you cannot just have these macros run in their own separate window, which means I'm gonna just have a massive amount of tabs in one window. So that whole possibility of separating things gets thrown out the window. Shouldn't be saying window when I mean Firefox window, and window as in the window in the house in an analogy. So yeah, I did a little bit of that. I finished Blackwell Epiphany. Yeah, definitely can't recommend the Blackwell series of point-and-click adventures. It's not my style, and honestly, I don't know if there really is much of an audience out there that would really love it. At the very least, I can recommend not trying to get all the achievements and not going through the commentary. Maybe if you had a short and sweet experience and got the games very cheap, then you could enjoy it better. And then I had so much extra time after finishing Blackwell Epiphany, I started to play Rethink Evolved, which the thing about Rethink Evolved is I just could not for the life of me figure out what it was. Because there's a game called Rethink, and Rethink was a laser puzzle game in 3D, and then they've gone on to make Rethink 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But they've also made Rethink Evolved, Rethink Evolved 2, Rethink Evolved 3, Rethink 4, Evolved 4, Evolved 5, and Evolved 6. So I didn't know if this was just a remaster of the first game or what. And now I can confidently say that Rethink and Rethink Evolved, while using pretty much the exact same assets, are a different collection of puzzles. And there's a fairly large difference between the two games. And there's no story at all in Rethink Evolved, which sucked. And there's just being able to beat the game in less than 7 hours completely and get all the achievements sucked for a puzzle game. It barely has maybe 60 puzzles. I don't think it's even that high. I think it's probably 59, somewhere around that. With there being 3 points in the game where you split and you can either take an orange path or a blue path, and then those paths merge back together, and you have to do the same puzzles a second time if you're going to make a second playthrough to see the other path. Although you could just use the load function and skip right to those decision points and finish the game even faster. There is no speedrun settings or clock or anything like that. There's no controller support. There are no Easter eggs. There's no story. There are a couple of gimmicks that are introduced, but one of the major gimmicks is introduced when you have only 10 puzzles left, and it doesn't even consistently use that gimmick for the remaining 10 puzzles. If you go through one playthrough, you're only going to do 41 puzzles at all. And yeah, the whole thing just left me lackluster. The settings, it's crazy. It has no controller support, so you have mouse and keyboard. But even then, I've often struggled to use WASD to move the character at the right spot I wanted to. The controls are just really clunky. And really, it's a game that should not be made in the Unreal Engine. It would make so much more sense if it was in the Unity engine to me, because then you could have ported this really low demanding puzzle game to things like the Switch and Android and iOS way easier. And there's weirdness already around the Rethink series, which if I get the games cheap, I'll continue down the Rethink path. Probably doing Rethink 2 and then Rethink Evolve 2, since we now know that they effectively are just two different series that use the same assets. And I think there might be something specific about the Rethink series in that there is possibly an effort to have a little bit more platforming and movement and dynamic elements, where the original Rethink series, I think, may be trying to stick exclusively to laser light puzzles. It is crazy though that Rethink Evolved calls itself Evolved and there are no new twists on the laser light puzzles that I could see. Although there was a block that may have been new, where you, anywhere in the puzzle, if you middle mouse button clicked, these blocks would switch from pointing one way to pointing another way. And I didn't even understand that gimmick the first time I played the game through. I simply found other solutions. And that is the biggest problem with the puzzle game genre in general, and specifically Rethink Evolved, is that many times I would solve the puzzles and I wouldn't be certain if it was the intended way to solve the puzzles. It has like no snapping at all, so when you put a cube down, it'll just be at whatever of the 360-degree angles you might be pointing at with your mouse cursor, and the cube will just go down where it is. The cubes have physics on them, both when they are charged up by being touched by a laser and they're redirecting lasers, and also when they're not. So anytime you walk forward after putting a cube down, you inevitably bump into the cube and knock it out of the direction it's pointing and mess up your setup. So you have to either jump over the cube, which is kind of awkward, or walk to the side or turn around and walk behind you. Often though, you don't have a ton of space as far as where you're putting the pieces, but almost every solution felt very inelegant. I don't think many solutions had even one axis of symmetry when you put it down. A couple of them looked a little nice, but they definitely weren't being polished and tested over and over again. And clearly there's some influence from like the Portal series, but it is totally missing any story, any voice acting, anything that made the Portal series really stand out. Had Portal 1 literally just been the first half of the game where you are in the test chambers and you do the test chambers and that is it, it would have been a very, very boring experience if you didn't have GLaDOS talking to you. And yeah, a lot of wanting for more And usually I'd say it's better for games to be short and sweet, but less than 7 hours? I'm really concerned what I paid for the game at this point, too. Did I pay $5 for less than 7 hours of entertainment? But yeah, you can't be that short and sweet. Short and sweet to me is 10 hours minimum. And a 10-hour puzzle game, fine. Perfectly acceptable. I still do kind of expect there to be a story of some sort. Or you're crossing a line into the point where you need to be a less than $1 Steam one-screen Unity puzzle game, which even at that, I've played so many of those. I'm trying really hard to not end up playing any more of those. And certainly, I guess if Rethink wasn't so pretty and looked like a cell phone game or a single-screen Unity game, I would have held it at a lower scale and to a lower standard. So it kind of hurt itself with its own graphics. And I think it actually hurts itself with its own graphics quite a bit. I fiddled around with the visual settings there, and turning everything up to epic or overkill settings, I think actually made the game look worse. And it defaults just to everything being at high, and it defaults to not even being at 1080p resolution. But yeah, I feel like when you turn up the graphics even more, it overdoes the visuals. And in some of these settings, like turning down the foliage made the game feel drastically different. You can turn it down so that there are basically no trees around you in the puzzles. Not that the trees matter, they're just there for visual reasons. Or you can turn it up where you are just surrounded by lots and lots of trees. Or you can have it at the second to lowest setting, which trees but no bushes. But yeah, that's really drastic. And then some of the shadows and lightings settings drastically change the whole experience too. Yeah, it's just weird that there's no tinkering options for the controllers. It almost would make sense to jump to Rethink Evolved 6, the newest Evolved game, and see if it's improved any. Because I have a real concern that this is a game made by one person who's using just like free, copyright-free music and the Unreal Engine, and he just is shoving out a whole bunch of Rethink games to make quick bucks and not learning or getting any better. And so it almost makes no sense to go through it in the numerological order and instead just skip to the end and see what the end is. Does the game have story? Potentially. Does it have controller support? Or is it exactly the same as the first in the series? Yeah. Probably wouldn't want to do that because that's just going to be boring cut footage. Though if I did do that. But it'll be a while before I even think about playing Rethink 2 or Rethink Evolved 2. It makes really no sense that they would just call it Rethink Evolved, though. There's nothing evolved about the game compared to the first game. And then there is also weirdness that the first game, I think, was better in its original format, which you also can play, versus the commercially available format. Which there might be a case there where the developer got feedback from people who just wanted the laser puzzles and nothing else, and they created a game that is very much one note that I didn't appreciate as much as the original version of the game, which had mostly laser puzzles but also had a little bit of platforming and a little bit of different puzzles. So yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting to finish the game in a matter of a day. I mean, it's been less than 24 hours, and I've just burned through it. Yeah. Yeah, if I'm not feeling great, I'm probably not going to do a lot of cleaning and decluttering. I did see somebody on my local, one of those local city groups on Facebook, offering free services to clean and declutter people's houses, and it's for people who need it, obviously, and almost certainly it's a scam. I would have to really assume it's a scam, but heck, I may try and see what happens, but I need to still sort through a lot of stuff, a lot of personal paperwork and stuff still, before I would be comfortable bringing someone in to just do generic cleaning. Okay, so in this we can see I turned off the code that was closing the collection process of my news articles, so these are open still, but these would be closed. You can see this is from the 23rd, 3 days ago, this news, and this is page 2. You see this verifying that you're human actually can mess up my macros on some rare occasions, but weirdly it doesn't do a very good job of realizing that my macros are not humans, and I'm not doing anything crazy to try to tell it I'm not a human. So I can't help but wonder if those verification processes are only so good as catching the absolute most automated processes that are hitting websites with thousands of requests a day, every day, or are running on headless Linux builds that don't look anything like a real user's computer. Speaking of computers, Linus Tech Tips, which I'm going to always talk about them, regardless of whether people like them or not, probably, did a video on how to install and do the best clean install of Windows 11, and I have to assume that is just setting up for the end of Windows 10, which is a smart move. Like, I imagine his real suggestion would not to be to not use Windows 11 or install Windows 11, but he also wants those views. So we have, let's see, three articles open, 4 articles open from Video Games Chronicles, which makes me wonder, have we talked about Capcom strengthening the game development muscle with a new Osaka base? Nintendo Switch 2, the next Nintendo Direct will reportedly drop around the Switch 2's launch. Yeah, I think we've talked about all these articles. So I think it opened the exact right amount. And then I'm going to just assume that the Gematsu articles opened perfectly fine. Oh, by the way, I talked about this corpse party for a little bit, and you may have seen this thumbnail, and I didn't mention it, but this character is not nude, by the way, just in case you thought she was. this character is wearing a skin tone leotard type outfit. Of course, in animation, you certainly can make outfits look almost like nudeness, but I did not violate YouTube family guidelines there, and well, just stay quiet in hopes I wouldn't get caught. Of course, that is exactly what I would try to do. But yeah, Corpse Party as a series, I don't think goes so much into the lewdness. If they're going to get in trouble, it's going to be for the gore and violence and the horror. And so yeah, it is a weekend, Memorial Day weekend, so news is going to be sparse. I did see a handheld on sale on Slick Deals, but the handheld was a older handheld that had an Intel CPU. And I think we probably will see a short pattern of previous handhelds and even current generation handhelds that bet wrongly with an Intel CPU and an NVIDIA mobile chipset, and those handhelds will probably go on sale fairly quickly to clear inventory and won't really be worth getting it. If you got a handheld like that, you're running Windows on it. If you're running Windows on it, you're going to have a bad time. So I would only even begin to think about AMD graphics and AMD CPUs on handhelds if I was going to get a handheld. And really, I'd only think about a couple of handhelds at the moment that are highly likely to have SteamOS work on them, like the Lenovo Legion Go S, and I believe the MSI Claw here might also work with SteamOS, or is likely to work with SteamOS in the future. Otherwise, there's kind of a noticeable lack of sales over the weekend, except for one, and it's incredibly stupid, but I will put it out there. If you want to see all of Ranma 1/2, the anime, they have each season for roughly $15, plus the OAV and movies in a Blu-ray disc. So when you add that up, it is 8 sets of Blu-rays with about 3 Blu-ray discs in each set for about $15, which roughly with taxes and shipping and handling is about $140. So yes, you're getting a deal, but it is definitely an old school buying anime on DVD style deal. Difference now is this is a remaster and it's on Blu-ray. You're not getting the collector's edition versions of the Blu-rays for $15, but the collector's editions do seem to be on sale for about $30. So if you wanted to spend $300, then potentially you would go that route. The collector's editions probably have the exact same Blu-ray discs, but they include a manga and some other kitsch included in it. And so it's definitely something I would have done in my past when I was working and still living at home with my parents and not paying any rent. I would have gladly dropped $60 for a single box set, which usually is just one season of an anime. But times are tough now, and $130 is a hard thing to justify, particularly since I have some of the anime from that time that I still haven't watched. And there's very much a streaming aspect to this too. Ranma 1/2 seems to be available on Hulu. Will it always be available on Hulu? No. Have I watched any of it on my one half at all? No. That is the old school way of doing things too, is that the only way you could get anime in the old days was on VHS, then eventually Blu-rays, and eventually DVDs, then eventually Blu-rays. And there's basically only a small handful of 4K UHD discs that would ever come to 4K UHD. Although it is weird, because there really is no reason why you wouldn't be able to squeeze Blu-ray discs into a 4K UHD and put more episodes on it, and instead of having packages that have sometimes 5 or 6 discs in it if it's a DVD, or 3 Blu-rays, you just have one UHD disc. Although I don't think that the production costs are the same. Probably costs more to make 4K UHDs. It's all going away though, too. So yeah, that's about the only deal I've seen. And yes, this is on Amazon.com, and yes, there are some other animes that are on sale a little bit. They come and go on sale pretty often. But yeah, I probably spent somewhere around $2,000 or $3,000 in my heyday on anime. And in fairness, I enjoyed certainly most of it, in that I watched it at least once all the way through. I really only have maybe 2 box sets, well, 3 now, that I haven't sat through. But I'm also in a very different place in my life, and watching anime was what I did instead of playing video games. And so now I play video games and try to make content and try to make a YouTube channel that's actually successful, which I'm over 1,000 subscribers now. I'm at 1,020. I don't think I'm gonna fall below 1,000 subscribers unless something weird happens. So it is time to start putting out and scheduling content again, and try to get that watch time up by a couple thousand watch minutes. Which, yeah. And there were no new game developer articles, I think, today at all. Yeah. And that's just accurate. That there hasn't been a new article since the FTC has conceded defeat on the appeals over Microsoft merger. And I guess the story here is that the FTC failed in an appeal a couple weeks ago, and now they are asking for the case to be dismissed, which maybe they're asking for the case to be dismissed in their own court system, I believe, without prejudice, so that they could file new charges and trial it over again at a different date. Which I wouldn't be surprised if they did do that, and certainly they may have a lot more evidence in a future attempt to just show that Microsoft totally did lay off a massive amount of people, in part because they spent so much money acquiring Activision Blizzard, whether they want to admit that or not. But the FTC was making very much an argument about the products, and that Microsoft might make things like Call of Duty an exclusive to Xbox, and that argument failed. And then I'm going to assume that all the new Steam games came out in particular. Then right after that, I had an undefined tab that was opened. So we'll have to investigate what that was all about. I'm still playing Pokemon TCG Pocket. There's still nothing new to say about Pokemon TCG Pocket, and frankly, that is exactly the same thing I can say with Madoka Magica. They do seem like they have a new season and they're doing some slightly newer things. They're at least trying as a game that's only a couple months old, but I am still very, very close to being maxed out, and it is more a case of me just not spending the extra time to get to the end that has slowed me down from not being at the end. And I'm still playing Memento Mori, and probably am somewhat close to another leap in progress there before being stuck for several weeks. But yeah, still playing a lot of cell phone things, but not too much. Instead, I've been watching the second of two animes on Hulu that involve a girl being isekai'd, dying, and being reborn into an otome young novel visual novel game as the villainess. The first one I watched was called I Resurrected in an Otome, and so I'm taming the final boss, or something along that lines, and went fairly quickly. It went by very fast, the number of episodes, and kind of rushed through it because it felt like there was 2 seasons that centered around maybe 3 games. So it was more comedic and just not drawn out enough. Now, it doesn't need to be 7 seasons and movies and OAVs like Ranma 1/2. That's a much older series that would obviously have been drawn out a lot more. But, you know, maybe go 100 episodes instead of just 40. And so now I'm watching something else that I don't even know the name of. It's taking it a little bit more seriously and a little bit more slowly and less comedic, but it's basically a similar concept, although in the second one, which is weird that they released 2 animes with the exact same theme. In the second one, though, it is very much the case that the main protagonist is effectively replacing the lead love interests as far as all of the characters involved. So any females who would have been rivals to the heroine in the game are now in love with the villainess, and any males who would have been love interest to the protagonist of the game are now instead more likely to fall in love with the villainess. And it goes that way for, I think, about a season, and then it starts to become more just a group of friends hanging out and being friendly. And what's funny about the second one is that it starts with the character as a child, then it jumps to them being high school age, and even as a child there's a real effort to have a backup plan. So the villainess is constantly working a garden and trying to become a better farmer because she figures she's gonna fail at her plan of not being exiled, which is what happens in the game as one of the bad endings for the villainess, or one of the good endings for the protagonist. So she's just planning for defeat, that she's going to be a farmer and exiled in the future. So after many weeks of neglecting my chart here, I will briefly point out I have done worse to it. While I was working on the macros otherwise. It was running, but it was running where it was only adding the top 10 things, which has broken the chart. And so I'll have to go into the database effectively. It's a Google Sheets Excel sheet, and delete all the times that it only sampled the top 10 games so that it gets back to each number being in the right order instead of pivots like this, which I couldn't possibly explain why you have spikes and pivots like that. But yeah, until I do that, my chart will be broken. So let's drag that over there just so I remember all about that. So yeah, Rethink Evolved. Total played time 10 hours, 10.8 hours it says. I definitely wasn't actually playing that long. 100% of the achievements, 10 out of 10, which it was frankly pretty easy to get 9 out of 10 of them, and one of them is silly. And then Blackwell Epiphany, in contrast, says I had it running for 84 hours, and while it may have felt like that for a little bit, it probably was much closer to maybe 16 hours or so, playing it twice with the dumb commentary, which at least the commentary was a little bit better because it had artist commentary here and there too. I tried to get Sigils of Elohim to work on my Steam Deck and it just won't launch, which is a shame because there's just no reason why it shouldn't launch. What I should try and do actually see if I could install Talos Principle 2 on my Steam Deck and see if that would work instead. So yeah, I'm repeating themes here, playing a laser puzzle game like Talos Principle 2 and then playing Rethink. So I'm on a certain kick, undoubtedly. And yeah, my fall list, according to this, has 7,708 games on it, which potentially means that either the fall list is so corrupted it's only showing me 2,000 games, or there really are about 5,000 games that have been removed from Steam that are being excluded from it. But the number is going down every time I can get into the fall list, which is not very often, frankly. We'll see if that loads, but it probably won't. Steam has a Zombies and Vampires Fest, which we'd think might include pretty much every single game on Steam, or at least a significant portion of them. Well, I guess if I am trying to load this, that is going to slow down anything else from loading. But yeah, I don't expect that there will be anything new here on the front page other than the fest. And wouldn't expect too much to go on sale. I guess Memorial Day is probably never much of a sales day as far as video games and generic things, but it may also be an indicator that the fact that I saw just no slick deal sales at all, not for mattresses, not for large appliances, things that sometimes might show up on a holiday like Memorial Day, may also be a hint at what the future is to be. Noticeably, there's probably just another shutdown available coming for Kohl's in the United States, another brick and mortar store. Target probably can hold out for a while, but then I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or two Target also shuts down. There's just more and more people buying things online, and when we say online, let's face it, we're mostly talking about on Amazon.com and Walmart.com. Very little people going outside of those mega websites for buying a lot of stuff. So yeah, stores and the concept of brick and mortar stores are starting to disappear, with the exception of grocery stores, which, yeah, they'll stick around. And stores have been disappearing in the United States for a long time. You only have to go to any random mall or strip mall and you'll find large sections that are walled off or empty, shut down businesses. Fast food restaurants also are suffering and shutting down. So, yeah. Inherently, anything that is not going to be working in a factory or working in a field as a job is going to be a lot more competitive, a lot more competition to get those kinds of jobs. And generally, I think we are just hitting a real issue, but it's an issue that can be ignored for so long and just people can be forced to suffer. I mean, you can really just have a Great Depression that is slow for decades upon decades. Look at Brazil, look at some of the other really poor countries, look at Africa. There definitely is no reason why the people have to actually be prevented from starving to death. So, yeah, I'm concerned for the future generations, and just the future in general, like most people are. Psychonauts 2 is on 85% off for $8.99, which is a decent deal. It's not the best deal, and I would love to have Psychonauts 2, but it's really getting hard to justify buying video games. Although I did buy a game that was like $2.99. But yeah, right now I'm trying to hold on to all my pennies for hiring cleaners, remodelers, painters, landscape people, all kinds of stuff like that. All that boring practical stuff. These trailers, which they've got a different looking vest here, which, by the way Steam's front page looks on the Steam app on a cell phone, looks like it might have changed a little bit too. But yeah, they definitely are trying to shove more things in your face in smaller groups, making things bigger instead of tinier icons. And yeah, I guess if some of this was on sale, it might be worth it. This Adventures of Van Helsing, for instance, might be a consideration. Let's look at that. And we'll claim our free point shop items. There's definitely enough room for a sale for just zombie games and a sale at a different time for just vampire games. And we're not anywhere close to October, so you would think this kind of fest might happen then. And there's always vampire and zombie games coming out new. It's a couple of genres that have been around for a very long time. So you have zombie games, vampire games, free to play, VR, free demos, and upcoming. No Steam Deck section here. Which, yeah, it seems like for a brief moment there they were going to have Steam Deck sections focusing on Steam Deck compatible games every time there was a sale. But I don't think Valve really cares to push the Steam Deck quite a bit at the moment. It's very possible that they have determined it would be a waste of their time and money to promote the Steam Deck as a 3-year-old device while people are talking and interested around the Switch 2. Maybe the Switch 2 will, in the future, prove to be something that's not as well desired. I'm sorry, I'm pausing and pausing quite a bit here in between each of my sentences. Again, maybe that's a factor of me not feeling great, but I'm having trouble staying up with myself as I talk. Which, in fairness, that happens even on my best of days, is that I'll start slowing down a little bit. Put that on the wish list. You're still in a good position, I would say, to want to get a Steam Deck if you can get it cheap and refurbished. It did occur to me, though, there is room for buying a Nintendo Switch that has a bad battery or a broken screen, or buying a bunch of those in bulk and then converting them and selling them as a modified device that only works in the dock. Like, if you could get broken Nintendo Switch originals with broken screens, and then you pulled the battery out of it and you pulled the screen out of it, or put a black piece of sticker over it, then you shoved it into a dock and maybe put a piece of tape over it so it can't come out of the dock, and then maybe you connect a Gamepad Pro to it, and you don't sell Joy-Cons with any batteries in it because of Joy-Con drift. You could get some broken parts fairly cheap and then make a docked only home version of the Nintendo Switch that then people might be willing to buy on the cheap. So you might have some tight margins there, and I don't know if the sales pitch of not having a battery in it so the battery would never leak or explode, and not having Joy-Cons because they have batteries in it, really are great sales pitches in the first place. But it almost feels like it's a project people should do themselves, is that there should be a way to take broken Switches and put them in the dock easily and just make them always work in the dock. And there probably is a pretty easy way to do that already. And it may not even be worth it to take the battery out of it. And the same concept certainly could be applied to the Steam Deck too. Except for Valve could actually do it proper, and Nintendo could do it proper too, in which they could take the motherboard out of the Steam Deck and not attach a battery and not attach a screen, and then build it into a different kind of package that would be plugged into the dock and plugged into a TV. But yeah, I guess for Nintendo and Valve it's just easier to refurb one SKU and resell it as refurbished than it is to create a new SKU, a whole different product. Yeah. Monster Train is new on the top charts of Steam Deck games. Yeah. Oh, I did see a slick deals, and so again, I'm shopping way too much, but I'm not spending anywhere as much as I'm shopping. I never did, but the Asus routers, a couple of them are on sale right now, and if you want to spend over $100 for a good quality gaming router and you have high-speed internet in over 300 megabits up and down, then I would highly recommend the Asus routers. It is what I've been using. You can put the Asus Merlin firmware on it that adds a little bit of new functionality that is really nice, but it doesn't do anything crazy like DDWRT did, where it changed the way the router looked completely and gave you a whole bunch of settings that no one person could really understand to mess with and potentially mess up your network with. Even with Asus Merlin, it looks 99% exactly the same as the default Asus firmware. The main things with Asus Merlin is just running things like AdGuard Home on it, and that's really the main thing that I use it for. I also have Borg backup running on it, mini DLNA server running on it, which maybe you couldn't have done all of that. Yeah, you couldn't have done at least 2 out of those 3 things without Asus Merlin. But the rest of the things, if you don't install the custom firmware, work just fine. WireGuard, VPN setup, and your standard Wi-Fi setup, QoS setup, things like that. It's all done very nicely and tries to help you as much as possible. So I wouldn't really inherently call it a overwhelming technical experience. Now, is it an idiot-proof experience? No. I don't know if there are some Apple-style routers out there that just idiot-proof the whole thing and set it up the way Apple wants it and gives you no options at all. But it is a reasonable setup experience. There's explanations on every page as far as what you're looking at and what you're doing. Unfortunately, I imagine a lot of people who do buy routers, if they're buying routers at all and not just being handed one by their ISP, probably do just plug it in and set nothing else up at all. And these are gaming routers, so they are trying for faster gaming speeds with less latency. And now is a decent time to get a new router, something that supports Wi-Fi 6 at the minimum, I would say. I don't think there's inherently a huge need for Wi-Fi 6E unless you're going to have a mesh network, which then you definitely need Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7, if anything even supports Wi-Fi 7 for mesh networking if you have a really big house. But the reality is most devices are still going to either connect by 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz, not the 6 gigahertz that Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 use. Alright, well, we'll go through the Video Games Chronicle articles very quickly here. Again, there's only 4 of them. Apparently, Nintendo Switch 2 consoles have been spotted at US retailers ahead of the launch. Switch 2 is pictured at stores with less than 10 days until the release. I signed up for a notification on GameStop when the pre-order option was available for the Switch 2, and I never got an email. So I am assuming I may get an email the second it is actually available that says just go to the store and get in line or something like that. It'll be very interesting to me, certainly, to see what this really turns out to be. Will there be a bunch that stays on the shelves because nobody can afford it, or will there just be a bunch of scalpers type people that buy it, or just a high demand of people that buy it? Is this some kind of Roku device? It says, I'm trying to figure out what this purple thing on the other side here was, but I don't know. I don't even know if this is the electronics section. If anything, this looks like this may just be a cage that is being wheeled around to put it into the glass, which behind glass, I'm not sure you'd even really want to do that much. Let's see. Here you have a Target. They got 20 units. Apparently. 20 Mario Kart bundles and 20 regulars. Apparently this is Target. Of course, remember there is also a blacklisting attempt that's happening against Target at the moment because of them dropping their DEI initiatives. Although, frankly, lots of companies have done that now. They were just one of the first, and so a African American majority church started this movement that has maintained some strength, I think, as far as not shopping at Target. And in general, people have been blacklisting Target for a very long time because their prices were always too high. Yeah, was this just some kind of like Windows Office software? Or cell phone cases? Some, probably not even cases, maybe cell phones. But yeah, 40 units isn't really a lot. So they may very well sell out the first batch of Switch 2s simply because there aren't that many in the first place available. Let's see, World Rally Championship rights have returned to Nacon after EA Codemasters ends the rally game development. Nacon says it will develop a complete reboot of the World Rally Championship games. Okay. For the fans of World Rally Championship games, I suppose that's exciting. I don't know how many of those actually exist. But that is an article I guess I can't say much more about. Hellblade 2 is finally getting a physical version along its PS5 port. Limited Run revealed that Hellblade 2 box version as the box version publisher. It's weird. We're in a very dangerous situation here where there will be more publishing and push for Hellblade 2 being released in physical and on the PS5 than there was publishing and pushing for South of Midnight at all. Which, if that doesn't occur, I'm going to have to give some side-eye to that. One game is about a Nordic woman, the other game about a American woman of African descent. And yeah, one game being much newer, South of Midnight, should have been pushed and promoted a lot more by Microsoft. Which at the end of the day, Microsoft is the parent company that owns both of these games. And I don't know if maybe they are hoping for a second bite at the apple by releasing Hellblade 2 on the PS5 to get some kind of awards from like the Game Awards or something by re-releasing Hellblade 2. Probably not. It's probably just trying to get sales. That would make a lot more sense. Sony tipped it to announce a PS5 Pro and PlayStation 5 discounts this week. Some Sony days of play reportedly set to return with price cuts to the PS5 range. Didn't they already push the price up though? So if they give a price cut, it may literally just be putting things back to where it is. And who knows if tariffs are going to affect that or not. So yeah, I seriously doubt you're going to be spending $250 and getting a PS5 Pro. Still going to be a $400 device. And yeah, with every day not having any major announcements as far as software for the PlayStation lineup, it just feels less and less likely that anybody really needs to get a PS5. I think it really is more a case that most people that have PS5s, and that they're a big enough community that they're not going to jump ship. Which, in fairness, if you bought a PS5 Pro a year ago, and it's going to be really hard to justify building a computer and trying to put something on it besides Windows 11 and get into PC gaming that way, or live with Windows 11 and get into PC gaming that way. The Steam Deck doesn't really make a very good argument against the PS5. So I imagine we will have a long running generation of people that have PS5s and hold on to their PS5s. As long as Sony occasionally gets a third-party game for the PS5, it'll be fairly relevant. But if Sony announced the PS6 tomorrow, I don't know if there'd be that much enthusiasm for it, particularly without any new launch titles. And even if they did have several new launch titles with a PS6 announcement, this fictional PS6 announcement, people still might be peeved that there just haven't been enough exclusives or AAA games, first-party games from Sony on the PS5. Alright, well, that's going to bring us to the Gematsu articles. A first-person shooter called Davy X Jones has been announced for consoles and PC. Which we have a Steam link to that, so we can go ahead and look at it. Might be something. I think I heard some talk that there was going to be an announcement about the next BioShock game, which I think secretly they have had another BioShock game in development, but nobody really knows what it is or how much development has really been put into it. So I doubt this is the next BioShock game, but gun in one hand, magic in the other might be very close to what this is. And it is a single player game, which it seems almost like a miracle every time you get even one single player game. I think most people would want to see a return to Rapture for anything called BioShock. And the person who made the first BioShock, or at least gets the credit for making the first BioShock, is still working on his game Judas. So until Judas comes out, the next BioShock game is probably going to not be released, just so they don't compete with each other. But yeah, I think just returning to Rapture, maybe dropping a lot of the spiritual, magical stuff that was particularly taken to the extremes in BioShock Infinite, might very well help too. Yeah, I don't think we have to really go any further down the route of BioShock Infinite. The crazy thing, though, is if there is a new BioShock game, I can't help but wonder if the Trump administration might influence the development so much there that a new BioShock game has a pretty obvious, blatant Trump character as the bad guy, and Rapture is this kind of twisted thought of what a Trump-like leader might do to Rapture. Of course, I imagine some people might make an argument that Andrew Ryan was already very Trump-like. Moving on, Komatsu article says Rydo remastered The Mysteries of the Soulless Army. The Principles of Rydo Episode 2 trailer is available if you want to check that out. This game is going to get announcements and trailers like crazy. A game called Nakwan Last Paradise has a game overview trailer, which is definitely looks like a zombie game. Yeah, I'm still desperately not putting anything on the follow list, trying to get everything off the follow list as much as possible. And then Taken 8 DLC character Faku Ram launches July 10th, and then Armor King launches this fall. I would assume this is Armor King since he's wearing armor. Now what's funny about this is that the Steam link exists for this page, but in my curation when it opened this page, which by the way is mostly negative in the last 30 days, 31% and 53% overall, with maybe some kind of off-topic review bombing if you want to believe that. So the fact that this tag here, sexual content, exists for this game had my curation close it. So it's looking anywhere for that tag, even if it's not the first 5, which one would assume that the tag sexual content is more relevant than even story rich. So there's more gambling than sexual content and less story richness than sexual content. That would be my guess. And honestly, I don't think there really is any in this game. There might be some lewd bikini outfits, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's barely any of that. So, at some point, I probably need to figure out a different way to curate, or games like this are going to get closed on rare occasions. Notice here that there is no mature content description at all in this game. So, yeah. If anything, I would suspect Tekken 8 is somewhat disliked because all the characters are fully dressed. Like, all these screenshots seem to be fairly tame for Street Fighter type outfits, fighting game type outfits. And it wasn't just Tekken 8 that was closed. Another game, another big game, was also closed. I forget what it was. But better safe than sorry, you know. So the macro is doing what I asked it to do. It's just being more efficient than I perhaps wanted it to be. Which, that's always a weird problem to have when you have programs or macros working too good. Moving on to gaming on Linux. Let's see, Myst Masterpiece Edition, Riven 1997, and Myst 3 Exile get upgraded and are now Steam Deck verified. Interesting. Although, it's kind of interesting that they wouldn't have run before this point. It is still a little boggling as to what works and what doesn't on Proton and SteamOS and Steam Deck. The 2.0 patches for all three games contain major quality of life improvements, including but not limited to more robust controller support, better save game support, and better platform support for both Windows and Mac. This also includes an official Steam Deck verified status for all three of the titles on Steam. What's funny about this is that it includes Myst 3 Exile, because Myst 3 Exile still is kind of the forgotten game of the series that I still believe was made by Ubisoft, where Myst 4 and Myst 5 are really different games, so upgrading them are probably going to be more difficult. That being said, it may not be that difficult because these are all just using ScumVM to run these old versions of the game. So most of the work here is the ScumVM emulator in the background. Remember, Cyan, the makers of the Myst series, laid off a bunch of people recently, about half of its office, after getting really big and trying to make games again. This may very well be an indication that they are back to being in stasis, effectively just releasing and trying to resell games they've already made, which is basically just Myst and Riven. Of course, I imagine they are ambitious enough that they would want to remake Myst 3 like they just remade Riven. Not the 1997 version, but the 2024-25 version. Yeah, let's see what that page even looks like. Let's see what all these pages actually look like. So yeah, Myst Masterpiece Edition is not by any means the newest version of Myst, or the one I would inherently recommend. Yeah, for a new generation, it definitely doesn't make a lot of sense to say come back and play this version, which really is a middle of the road version of Myst. This might be the most remastered version that is still in line with the original version of Myst, which in reality the original version of Myst I think is the Apple II version of Myst, but Windows 95 version of Myst. But I don't think you really even want that. I think you would prefer to play real Myst if you wanted the older version of Myst. Let's see. And if you want to play the best version, you'd play the 2021 version of Myst, just called Myst. Let's actually just click on this and see all their games in order to bring this down some more. So yeah, the rebooted, remade Myst, the rebooted, remade Riven definitely points to a Myst 3 Exile coming out and being rebooted and remade. This was released in 2018, probably on Steam. I bet it was released earlier than that, though. And I think maybe it was on Steam once before, maybe. There's actually very little reason why you would want to play real Myst, though, at this point. Yeah. Yeah, you're going in circles, certainly, now, at this point, as far as trying to figure out which Myst games you would want to play and which Myst games you wouldn't want to play. Let's see. This was developed and published by Cyan Worlds, the 1997 version of Riven. And yeah, the visuals are rough, certainly. And I guess there was never a Riven Masterpiece Edition, or a real Riven, using the real media player technology. So this really is the only version of Riven you could have played until they released a new version. But yeah. Myst 3 Exiles says the developer is Cyan Worlds and Presto Studios. And then the publisher was Cyan Worlds and Ubisoft. So if their next step is to remake Myst 3, which says it came out in 2001, they might have to license back the game to themselves, or license it from Presto Studios or Ubisoft, although maybe Ubisoft doesn't care. This is the last of the Myst games, though, that still felt like a Myst game. Myst 4 and Myst 5 just get weird. Let's see if Presto Studios even has anything else. Well, they're listed as part of the 30th anniversary collection. Then they have a game here called the Journeyman Project 1 Pegasus Prime, which is from 1997. Just looks like an old CDI interactive game, if I was to guess. Sega CD interactive game. Alright, moving forward. Actually, let's not move forward. Again, I'm not feeling particularly great, so I'm gonna take a bathroom break the second I feel like I need to, so I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Once again, these Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel replays are always wild. Just crazy cards I don't recognize. Way too many card combos being played. It is a game that is too old for its own good, in my opinion. Yeah, I've been thinking about tweaking my smart home. This has nothing to do with video games. Again, I just ramble in these podcasts. And this is one thing that having smart bulbs and really can do that nothing else could, is I have installed most of the track lighting in my hallway. The stuff I haven't done is hacksawed or figured out any other way to cut down the track lighting to get to the last bits in the edges. But there is a point where the track lighting goes through a curtain effectively. It's just slightly above the curtain. And so there are lights inside the curtain, and then there's a curtain in front of my front door. And there's a light pointing down there. So the only thing you couldn't do this without a smart bulb, but I can program it so that the light that is effectively on the outside of the curtain, the light that really is just gonna light up a 4 foot by 4 foot square right in front of my front door, should only come on when it is powered, first and foremost, and when the curtain is open. But when the curtain is closed, it should turn itself off and put it in a do not disturb mode, which means once it gets power, it won't automatically turn on. It'll only turn on if you flip the power switch twice within a couple of seconds. Because the rest of the hull is powered by motion sensing switches that I definitely still want to work the way they are working. And for the most part, they have worked perfectly, although the attempt to override and program an override into it, I'm not sure if that ever actually has worked. But there's only a few rare occasions where programming an override into it is actually needed. It'd just be if you are standing very still in the middle of the hallway. But yeah, that is something I can do just by, or at least I probably can do by experimenting with the Tuya smart home app without having to buy any new items. Might make things a little bit nicer, certainly. In particular, I also, when the curtain is closed, you're obviously asking for privacy. There's a big window in the front door, so people can just look into your house otherwise. So walking down the hall and turning on all of the lights indicates something. Although, in fairness, I used to have it where the doorbell would open the curtain too, and I have since disabled that. Too many people ringing my doorbell, trying to sell me something, and me trying to ignore them, and then the curtain only likely encouraging them. So yeah, in a funny way, I'm isolating myself and hiding out in my house, but not to a crazy amount, just to the normal amount that at this point in 2025 there's never going to be any good news if somebody rings your doorbell. At best, it's going to be a package that you can pick up later without having to talk to the delivery person or even see them. At worst, it's going to be somebody trying to sell you something, or it's going to be the police for some reason. And even in the case of the police, you should just pretend like you're not home and not answer the door. Yeah. The only reason you would answer the door is if you honestly thought that they might kick down your door, and that whatever reason that they're coming into your house is safe enough that you getting a door kicked down is not worth it. But frankly, there's basically no scenario where that is the case. If cops are willing to kick down the door, they're probably coming in to arrest you for something, and whether you're guilty or not, your door should be the last thing you're concerned about. But very often, if police are trying to arrest you for something small, they'll just get bored and leave if you don't answer the door, and they can't figure out that you're actually there. Or at least they used to. Who knows in these days? And I guess that's all I've heard. I don't have any first-hand experience. Anyways, we're supposed to be talking about gaming on Linux articles, and a lot of these I think may be still repetitive. I'm not sure what specifically happens that the gaming on Linux articles don't wrap up in the same way that the other articles do, but something weird happens there. So a game called In the Restless Ruins gets you to deck build a dungeon and explore it, I guess with cards, which feels a little bit like the blueprints now. At this point, I don't feel like I have heard any new talk around the blueprints, so that one may very well have also been taken as far as it can go. This is a game that somehow I missed. May 15th, that was 11 days ago. The fan-made PC port of Star Fox 64 gets a Linux version and a big update. Starship, the fan-made PC port of Star Fox 64, announced by the team who also made the PC ports for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, to ship to Harkin, and Ship of Harkian has a new release with Linux version. So these games in particular, I should go out of my way to set up on my Steam Deck because they are going to be their own standout examples of what can be done. And their decompilation, no, they aren't, I think, actually decompilation efforts. They may have been helped by decompilation efforts, but I think they're at least claiming to be white box clones of the games, and that you still need the original ROMs for them to decompress and use the textures and the visuals and the audio from, in this case, Star Fox 64, to then build a completely new exe application, although in Linux it actually wouldn't end .exe, or more than likely wouldn't. So they've added specifically US 1.0 ROM support, JP 1.0 Japanese, voices only, and European Union 1.0 ROM support. So, yeah. And I imagine it's only going to get better. Also, I follow this GitHub page, so I got a notification when this new release came out, and I expect it will just get better. Although it may get to a point where it can't really get any better because it's just playing the game perfectly. But because this is a port, they can add more than what was there originally. And you can open the door to mods and changing the game in a different way. For instance, they've added 5.1 surround sound channels. Then the ending can now be skipped if it was seen at least once, which that too may not have been something that you could have done with the original Star Fox 64. So yeah, I do expect this to get better, although what we're really hoping for, more than just better fan-made PC ports of Star Fox 64 and Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, is we would really want to see it just become a snowball effect, in that more and more Nintendo games from the Nintendo 64 era can have PC ports and can run. Now weirdly, I don't know if this helps run Nintendo 64 games on something like a Raspberry Pi. Unless you have like the newest Raspberry Pi 5, it may very well be the case that they are still just not powerful enough CPU wise and RAM wise to play this. And so you may very well find that Star Fox 64 runs perfectly fine on modern computers, and the Steam Deck probably too, but when you start getting to something that is like the Raspberry Pi, where it's a system on a chip type setup, the processing power may just be too low. And we don't inherently know, even though if this has native Linux support, that it would support the ARM architecture in compiling. It might work just fine, or it may very well not. I would venture to guess that SSE optimizations for sound may not work if you're on an ARM chip, but would work on an Intel or AMD chip. But yeah, I would definitely prefer more Nintendo 64 games to be PC ported than just to get announcements that this team is just making what they've already done better and better. I'm happy they're making what they've already done better and better. But my general understanding is that most Nintendo 64 games, at least the first party ones, were programmed in very similar ways. So it really shouldn't be too hard to see a GoldenEye 64 PC port in the future coming out. In the future, it shouldn't really be that hard to see a Mario 64 PC port, which maybe that already exists and is just from a different team. And I really would expect that you would start to see smaller, lesser known games potentially supported. That's piqued my interest here. Let's see if we can if I type in list of 64 games, will it figure out Nintendo 64? Yes, it will. Good. So, I think I've done this once before, but we'll scroll down this list fairly quickly and see what really would jump out as what should be the next PC port remakes. Gotta figure out how to turn dark mode on Wikipedia. Like Bomberman 64, I remember playing it, but I'm probably gonna say that for several Nintendo 64 games, and that doesn't inherently mean that they were good or that I really should go back and play them again. The Cruising series, probably. Cruising Exotica, Cruising World, Cruising USA. Yeah. Diddy Kong Racing would be top tier as one you would want to do. Donkey Kong 64 would be top tier. Dr. Mario 64 would probably be fairly easy to do. So yeah, you're definitely going to find some that probably will become low-hanging fruit also. And as I'm scrolling down this list, there's frankly quite a few games here that are just reminding me that the Nintendo 64 lineup wasn't really full of bangers. Pilot Wing 64 would be a top tier one. We haven't gotten to it yet. Killer Instinct Gold might be a top tier one that you would want to see happen. As far as Zelda games, the two Zelda games for the Nintendo 64 have already been done. Maybe some of the Madden games might have a justification. All of the Mario parties would be top tier ones for people that want to play. Maybe Mega Man 64 too. I don't think the Nintendo 64 games of Mortal Kombat are really top tier. Some of these NBA Jam games might be top tier, and some of these other sports games might be not really top tier, maybe secondary tier. Paper Mario would be top tier. So it's going to be Pilot Wing 64, it's going to be Pokemon Puzzle League, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. Yeah, it's going to be the big names that you would want to see PC ports. And then after that point, there's almost a thought that maybe nobody would even bother to try and port the other games. Or it may very well be that one port is so easy that it can just port everything else very quickly. So Star Wars games might be second tier. Tetrasphere would be one I would want to see ported. Some of these Tony Hawk games might matter, although the Nintendo 64 versions of them very well may not matter at all. Yeah. Wave Race 64 would be top tier. Some of these wrestling games might matter to people. Wipeout 64 might be secondary tier. Yoshi's Story might be secondary tier. Yeah. There is actually not that many in the list. So they may just start jumping from Nintendo 64 PC ports directly to the just hold on to that tab for a second. They may just jump from Nintendo 64 to the GameCube games that they're more interested in after a certain point, because I don't believe GameCube games are developed too much different from Nintendo 64 hardware. They might be somewhat different, but well, there might actually be a pretty big difference between Nintendo 64 games and GameCube games, because GameCube games definitely didn't have backward compatibility with Nintendo 64 games, and the Wii had backward compatibility with the GameCube, but effectively there was just the hardware of a GameCube built into Wii's. So yeah, and Wii U's can also play Wii games, but I don't think they were built or programmed to actually play GameCube games. It's kind of funny and easy to forget that Nintendo did have 3 generations of consoles there that were using spinny discs as their medium before they went back to cartridges with the Switch. The GameCube had mini discs, which was kind of silly, and then the Wii's had regular sized discs, and the Wii U had regular sized discs. Where am I? I am in the wrong spot, I think. Right. Mega Not Demo. I'm not gonna play a demo. The Elder Scrolls Arena remake gets jolt physics and a big new features. This is OpenTES Arena, is an in-development open source game engine remake of the Elder Scrolls Arena. This sounds like a fan project to me. And jolt physics, I believe, was the physics that was just added to the newest version of Godot. So I wouldn't be surprised if this OpenTES Arena is being made in the Godot engine. Yeah. And at a certain point, a fan project to remake the game is not really preserving a classic as much as it's preserving the love of the classic. This does give us a nice picture of what the original Elder Scrolls game, the first game in the series, looked like, and that it was a dungeon crawler. Yeah, something here in particular is not letting the cookies be set. So, Elder Scrolls in all of its glory. See that mountain back there? You can't climb it. That was a joke based on what they said about Skyrim. But yeah, that overworld was probably a loading screen, if I was to guess. I never actually played this game. Killing rats in a dungeon. The cover art is pretty amazing for the first Elder Scrolls game too, and that you have this Bikini Babe character. Look at that fog. Just complete lack of draw distance. So yeah, the Elder Scrolls had a massive change in genre with Oblivion and Skyrim, and even the second game I think was a pretty large change. I'm not sure that there really is any story here in this game that you could use if Microsoft really did want to remake the whole thing. So yeah, if they were going to reboot the Elder Scrolls series, which it would make some sense, they would just call a new game Elder Scrolls 1 or the Elder Scrolls, something along that way. You can see how the stats are pretty similar to what they are in Skyrim, though. Interesting, I'm surprised there's voice acting in this death sequence. You can actually see in the distance. Yeah, in a funny way, because this is all just kind of randomly procedurally generated, this city is much bigger than any city in Skyrim. But yeah, I don't know how you really remake this game, and whether there's anything to remake that would catch on to any kind of nostalgia. The amount of people who are nostalgic for this game is probably very small. But obviously they exist, and I always appreciate when there is a fandom that exists and it's willing to go to this extreme that even Obsidian is not willing to go to. Although, let's face it, I don't know if anybody at Obsidian even worked on the original Elder Scrolls games, so they probably don't have any skill set or love for the game in the first place. Okay. So, moving on, Gaming Online says, after the publisher was banned from Steam, Bioprototype returns and it's free. Sometime in 2024, a publisher called BD Games was banned from Steam, taking with it numerous smaller games. Bioprototype from Improm Game recently returned to Steam without a publisher, and it's free to claim for a while. Now, is this game the one that's also going to be taken down after a while? I don't think so. But there was another game like that said it was going to be free and the soundtrack was free, and then it was going to be taken down in a week. And it might have been this game, because this game is already in my account. But yeah, we can show what it is, and it looks like it might be a Survivors type game. Certainly potentially worth it for free, but maybe not much more than that. I suspect they probably are giving the game away for free at this point to get goodwill to either sell a different game or to get better reviews and more reviews for a game that probably lost all of its reviews. It's a rare occurrence when a publisher is banned from Steam. Probably more should be banned from Steam, but if your publisher does go banned from Steam, then the game you developed may almost certainly lose its page and all of its reviews, and then there may be seems like a rather long process there for the game to get relisted via Steam Direct, which is, I assume, how it's listed now. Alright, next we have Bricadia is a Roblox and Lego combined. It's like Roblox and Lego combined, and it arrives on July 11th, which I'm not sure I'm particularly interested in anything that's Roblox like, but this could be something. Of course, it could also be nothing. Weirdly, you don't get a lot of games that look Lego-y or Roblox-y in the low effort listings that you typically see on Steam, so the fact that it's gone with this art style almost gives it a better chance. An Amazing Wizard is a Dead Cells-like where you mix spells out in early access. Let's see. This is yet another game that I missed. It is very possible over the course of the past couple of weeks, though I've been missing Steam games left and right. Luanti Mind Test is what it used to be called. Version 5.12 brings SDL2 keybind settings and reviews in the content browser. What is SDL2? I've heard of SDL2, but I can't remember what it is. But yeah, this is a Minecraft-like game. I don't think it is just a Linux launcher for Minecraft, though. I think it is its own separate game that just looks very much like Minecraft. Core Control app has entered maintenance mode with no new features coming. Core Control is a popular Linux app designed to get more control on your GPU and CPU. Interesting. So it may be that no new features need to be added, or it may be that they just are giving up on it. Proton Experimental Update enables gamepad input for all game launchers on Linux, SteamOS, and the Steam Deck. So that is in part, I think, because of Exalia, which is an open source tool that brings a gamepad UI for traditional desktop applications. And some of this work isn't just going to be Steam Deck and SteamOS related. I think eventually we are just going to see something like Exalia enabling controller support for almost every game on Steam, whether it's built in or not. That you're effectively going to just have a really good automatically set up joy to key type application that will launch even on Windows for games that don't have built-in gamepad support. Which that would be certainly nice. If it did get to that point. Because there is a decent number of games that don't have gamepad support. Although in fairness, if something launches and the gamepad works but then it plays terribly, what's the point? That was part of what I was doing while playing Rethink Evolved, is I was trying to set up joy to key to use an Xbox controller, and I'm glad I abandoned that because I would have potentially added an hour or two of work to just set up gamepad support for a game that was less than 7 hours long, and the controls, even with mouse and keyboard, were not particularly great with Rethink Evolved, so I recognized that a controller wasn't going to make it any better. Moving on, Star Vaders is a deck building meets grid-based tactics, and it's basically perfect according to Gaming on Linux, which, man, it really is just becoming more and more gaming and less Linux. Fanatical's latest Capcom Legends bundle has some good picks for cheap if you want to check those out. Spider-Man 2 gets NVIDIA DLSS 4 improvements and a Steam Deck SteamOS fix. Okay. Dune Awakening will have BattleEye enabled for Linux, SteamOS, and Steam Deck. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Just went into maintenance. Interesting. So if I take a bathroom break, you're gonna end up looking at this. Let's see. Warhammer 40k Mechanist 2 gets a first trailer, and you can get a free copy of Gladius. But I already got a copy of Gladius. And here's all the games you could claim for Steam Deck and Linux and Prime Gaming. Yeah. Heroic launcher for the Epic Good Old Games and Amazon games on Linux SteamOS version 2.17 has been released. Multiple Warhammer games enter the Good Old Game Preservation Program. Some of these articles are old, and some of these articles may very well be because I rolled back my checkpoints to make sure that my macro is working. Splitgate 2 gets a beta on Steam, works on Steam Deck but not other Linux systems for now. And then Steam Deck got its big upgrade to SteamOS 3.7. I think it may even be up to 3.8 now. They're running out of numbers fairly quickly, although they could go 3.10. They probably aren't going to want to do that. So they're going to have to make a decision pretty quickly here when they go to 4.0 and what is the line in the sand that they're drawing to say 4.0 is so significantly different from 3.0, which, sure, a lot has changed at this point. In fact, there isn't too much more I think that could change. If tomorrow there was a new kernel version for Linux, which very possibly there is, I don't think SteamOS is going to move to that new kernel. Or if there was a new version of KDE Plasma for the desktop mode, or if there's a new version of Arch Linux, which there's a new version of Arch Linux every day because you build it from scratch every time you build the operating system. None of that would really push Valve to move to the newest versions. So unless they were going to add some new feature that just felt like an amazing change, the feature for 4.0 is really just, are they adding support for other devices? And that process itself may be slowed down because there was no new handhelds at Computex announced that I saw. And so maybe at CES there would be some new hardware announced, but even if whatever the next big event that happens around the world around technology, if a new handheld was announced tomorrow, it's not going to really come out anytime soon. So I think SteamOS 4.0 is almost certainly going to be something that is specifically for the Steam Deck, the Lenovo Legion Go, and the MSI Claw. And then it might work on several other handhelds, or it might not, but they're not going to really care too much. I don't think they're going to take a giant leap and say the next version of SteamOS 4.0 in particular, is going to support all handhelds or all PCs. And frankly, they might, whenever they do make a SteamOS that they say supports all PC, they might just put like giant warning bells where if you have an Intel CPU, if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, it's just going to say this isn't going to work well. You need to install this on something with a AMD graphics card and a AMD CPU. So we looked earlier and saw that there actually wasn't any new GameDeveloper.com news. So that was correct. So that's going to bring us to all the new games on Steam, which we will try our best to jump through this. Yeah. I don't know why there are so many job simulating games out there. Although we may be at this point hitting a point where people are going to yearn for the experience of having a job and doing a job as they disappear and get replaced with automation and robots. Although in fairness, I really don't think we're going to have robots cooking and flipping burgers in McDonald's anytime soon, because I think there's just too many McDonald's and too many locations where somebody would jump over the counter and smash the robots or steal the robots. There definitely might just be a new Luddite movement that could actually be implemented in that case, where you're smashing weaving machines. But we already see robots doing a lot in car assembly lines, and doing a lot in electronic assembly, and doing a lot in shipping and receiving. So it will continuously be that case, and it's just not going to be new jobs made. I don't think that was always the claim, is that robots would take the boring jobs and then there would be new interesting jobs made, or everybody would become an artist, which everybody can become an artist or a content creator nowadays, but that doesn't really mean anything. Here we have a new Sakura game from Wing Cloud, which all their games have Sakura in the name and all of their games have some lewd imagery, but I don't think their games actually ever have any nudity in them. Although I may be wrong about that, a couple of them might. Yeah. Oh, there was a new season of Clarkson's Farm, or at least the first few episodes of Clarkson's Farm for season 4. And apparently, at least in the UK, they don't till the soil, which maybe that is the case in the United States too, and I just wasn't aware of it. There's a high possibility of that they, instead of tilling the soil to get rid of weeds, just spray weed chemicals. And apparently tilling the soils releases a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, and so that's why they in part don't till the soil, or at least that's what they say, said on the show. Which, yeah, so that's something they tried to do, is tilling the soil. I don't think it actually even worked. I think they broke their machinery. Let's not do prologues as far as making YouTube shorts. Now, with the way the macros are set up now, the next time I run my macro, it's just going to be further to the right of my first window in Firefox. So it actually might save me some time, but it will become annoying. Too, because I'll have to scroll around a lot to figure out where the start point is. Although I could probably fix that pretty easily too by just jumping back to where I started after everything is said and done. So yeah, I find Clarkson's farm fun to watch, although I feel like some of it is definitely staged and more propaganda than truth. And yeah, I question how much Jeremy Clarkson really is doing. If anything, I would guess it's probably a couple extra hands that don't show up on screen that are helping out too. Yeah. He's looking for his restaurant, and I know from other videos that he eventually does pick a place to be his restaurant, at least temporarily. So I already half of the plot line. I already know the outcome there. He's trying to buy a pub and promote the idea of a pub culture, which honestly I don't really think the pub culture in the UK is actually as good as they say or they want it to be, in that you're basically just promoting bars. And sure, maybe they serve food too, but there is a heavy emphasis on drinking in pubs, and there's a de-emphasis certainly on being home and eating a home-cooked meal and things like that instead. Eating healthier foods. And yeah, I've never seen an example of people socializing in a particularly healthy manner in pubs in the UK. I just see a bunch of drunken people having fun together, which is fine, but yeah. If that's all your culture really is that we like to get drunk together, like any other friendship that is just built around getting drunk together, that's not on very high-minded ideals that you're maintaining a relationship. Okay, well, I would say we're going to do the follow-us cleanup, but I'm not 100% sure, because the only thing left here is a Gaming on Linux article. Let's see. Of this game getting a demo. I feel like I may have accidentally closed several things there that I would have wanted to actually make YouTube shorts on. Yeah. I'm just looking around here on my other tabs and other windows just to see if there is anything open that I want to talk about. I think we probably talked about this. Proton experimental update enables gamepad input for all launchers. Yeah, we talked about that. So that's another one we can close. Yeah. Just moving some tabs around now. Okay, well, I think that is it. So we still have a problem where the follow list is not, follow list cleanup is not happening for some reason. Something's still going wrong there. And otherwise, I have some other things I still need to fix and work on. But none of that really was why this turned out to be barely 2 hours. The real reason why this turned out to barely be 2 hours simply is because of it being a 3-day weekend and this just not being quite the time for video game news. And next week might be the time for a lot of video game news, and we'll probably have a decent amount of video game news even on Wednesday. So that's gonna be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.